Welcome to Lois and Morgana Davidson Art. It's Lois here, and today I'm testing these really cheap watercolour paints from a discount art store in the UK called Works. The brand is Crawford and Black, and these watercolour paints, this little set has only cost £5 and there's 12 of them. That means that they are less than 50p per tube. It looks like a good range of colours, so let's see what we've got. So lemon yellow, ochre yellow, orange, burnt sienna, deep red, burnt umber, violet, sap green, cerulean, ultramarine, white and black. And I'd say that's quite a good range. There's nothing here that I'm looking at and thinking, oh, that's a bit strange. They look all like good workaday colours, useful colours, especially for landscape painting. And they've come in this sort of plastic tray. Not keen on the plastic, to be honest, but at least they're in a box that is cardboard and recyclable. Each tube contains 12 millilitres of paint. That's a fairly good amount. They've got screw tops. The tubes are metal, as you'd expect. No more details other than the brand and the colour, burnt sienna, so no pigment numbers, light fast ratings or anything like that. These are cheap paints, even cheaper than student quality branded paints, so I wasn't really expecting to get any of those details. So it's a sealed tube with a little pointed end on the cap that you then use that to pierce the tube. So I think I'm going to swatch these out, probably off camera because it's a bit boring watching me doing the swatching, but I'll come back and show you the results and then get straight into a landscape painting. And let's find out if these are the worst paints I've ever used or if they're good value. So here are the swatches, and I have to say I'm pretty impressed so far. They swatched out nice and easily. They mixed easily with the water. As you'd expect, they're not quite as pigmented in some cases as the student quality or artist quality paint that I'm used to, but they're pretty good. All the colours look nice, they all look usable, but the proof of the pudding will be in the painting when I try them out and see how they mix and work together in a landscape. I doubt if I'll use all the colours. Those of you that are regulars to the channel know that for my personal work, I prefer really dark, earthy colours for my own work and rarely use the brighter colours. So if you want a longer look at some of the brighter colours, pause the video now. And I think I'm just going to paint a sort of a stormy sky, put the paint through its paces, wet in wet. I'm going to be using good quality paper. That should help quite a lot. It's Saunders Waterford cold pressed cotton watercolour paper. It's taped to my board and my board's at an angle of about 20 degrees. I'm going to wet the sky all over with a large wash brush. I was going to say with clean water, but I've just dipped it into my old paint water, so it's just very, very slightly grey. That helps you to see where I'm putting the water. I'm bringing it down to cover about 2/3 of the page and then just a little bit across the foreground area. And this is the ochre yellow, I think. Yep, the ochre yellow. And then I'm going to dip into ultramarine blue, black and burnt umber. And I'm going to get some darker paint here and there across the sky and try and sort of leave some of the unpainted paper to give me the effect of clouds. So I get a sort of a streaky, stormy sky painting around the ochre yellow. So far so good. These colours look as I would imagine raw sienna, Payne's grey, burnt umber or sepia, and maybe sort of ultramarine or indigo would look on the page. I'll spray it with the water spray just to get that paint running a little bit more, and then rotate it 90 degrees again so that the water and the paint just run and diffuse wet in wet over the page to give me this beautiful sky. Just encouraging the paint in certain areas, just gently looking to see how this is looking and how it's sort of diffusing, just giving it a little bit of a brush here and there and then straightening up the horizon line. There's a bit of water pooling in the middle, so I'm going to use a clean, damp mop brush, I think it's a size 6, to just disperse that and soak up some of the excess water so I don't get any blooms. And that's pretty much the sky finished. We'll see how that turns out. I'll turn it round, and now I'll lay the board flat so that the washes don't run down the page anymore. And that's the sky done. I'm going to move on to the foreground, put a bit of paint across there. Sorry, I forgot to switch on my camera, but I've just used this large mottler brush. It's like a large flat wash brush. And I've just dragged more of the sky colour across the foreground, and it's given me some dry brush in places and blocked colour in others. So I'll just play with the effects that are there and just see if I can get it to look a little bit like some sort of a landscape. I'm just testing the paint, so I'm not trying for anything particular here, just trying out different effects and seeing what happens. So that's black, ultramarine blue, and I think the burnt umber. Onto the flat brush, just introducing a bit more of the ochre yellow, brightening it up in places, smoothing things out, and getting a little bit of that yellow glow in the sky reflected in the foreground. And now I'm going to dip into nice, rich, almost tube consistency, black, ultramarine and burnt umber again, and just get a bit of it across in the foreground, something and nothing, see what happens. Just getting some more texture and some more tone into the foreground, seeing how the paint behaves. And I must admit, I'm not unhappy with the paint. I think it's, at the moment, it's working really nicely. I mean, we've yet to see how it dries, but I'm really enjoying painting with it, especially as I'm using my kind of colours. So this is sort of turning into a fairly sort of loose, expressive, almost abstract landscape, and so I will enhance that by scraping some sort of perspective lines, sort of running in a shallow diagonal through the foreground with the palette knife. You can see that I've managed to scrape back to the white of the paper, and that's a good thing. So it means that the paint at the moment, these colours anyway, aren't too staining. Really cheap paints like these are sometimes made with dyes and not pigments. So sometimes if you do end up with staining from cheap paints like that, that's just one of those things, and that's why it is better to get branded student quality or artist quality paint if you can afford them. But if you want something to practice with, my view at the moment is that these cheap paints from the works, or probably anything similar in discount art stores in your country, would be a great thing just to mess around and play with. And with each of these tubes coming in at less than 50p each, then I think it's certainly worth getting some if you just want some cheap paint to practice with. I'm now going to leave it to dry completely, and we'll come back and see what we've got. So it's completely dry, and these colours are a little bit closer to the actual colours now that the light has improved in my studio this afternoon, but I will get a really good photograph at the end, as I often do, just to show you the colours. I'm really pleased. I'm going to make a few adjustments, join up that gap on the horizon, I think, just with a little bit more of that same dark colour. And then I'm going to pick out a few darks in the foreground, in and around the lighter scraped marks. As I said before, this has turned out to be sort of a bit of an abstract, loose, expressive landscape. I'm not really worried about it not really looking like anything in particular. This is to test the paints, and for me these paints work beautifully. Well, these colours do anyway. I'm going to test the lifting quality of the paint in a moment as well, because if you look on the sort of right, a third in from the right side of the horizon, there's a little blob that I am not happy with. So I'm going to just use my little short bristled scrubber to scrub that with a bit of clean water, leave it on there for a second or two, and then dab that off with a tissue and just see if I can remove it. And yes, that's lifted really nicely, so that's a good sign. It's always good to know that you can lift these paints. I think to finish it off, I'm going to lay a piece of paper over the sky to protect it. This is known as a soft mask. And then I'm going to use the fan brush to spatter some of the burnt sienna over it, and then I'll put some of the ochre yellow. I'm always wanting to call it yellow ochre, but of course this one is ochre yellow. I'm going to spatter that across it as well, just to add a little bit more texture, a bit more freshness, and then we'll sort of see how that looks. And I like that. Those colours are standing up nicely against the dark foreground, so I'm going to take the tape off and have a look at it. I might spatter a bit of the darker colour in a moment, but I want to see it all without the tape so I can see it with fresh eyes and see whether it needs it. And now that I've removed the tape, I'm really pleased with the way these colours have performed. But I am going to lay the soft mask over the sky to protect it and just spatter in with a bit more of that dark mixture that I made from black, ultramarine blue and burnt umber. And using the fan brush, just put a few dark drops of spatter onto the dry foreground. And I think that will just finish it off quite nicely and just add a bit more texture to the foreground. Yeah, I'm really pleased with these paints. I highly recommend them if you're on a budget and you want something to practice with. I think they work really well. Bear in mind, they are not archival, they may not be light fast, but if you want something to practice with at less than 50p a tube, I would say these are a bargain, and certainly not the worst paints that I've ever used. But I would say always try and buy the best quality paper that you can afford. For me, paper is the most important thing. If you've got a nice quality paper, and you can sometimes get them really discounted in art shops or online, but if you've got a nice quality paper, it matters far less the quality of your paint and the quality of your brushes. But these paints, definitely recommend them for practice, but as I said, they're not archival, so I wouldn't recommend them if you're wanting to sell your work. Thanks so much for watching. I hope that was helpful. Let me know what you think in the comments, and let me know if you have any recommendations for cheap paint or any nightmare horror stories for awful paints that you've bought and really hated, and we shall look forward to reading them. And thank you so much to everybody that supports us on Patreon. And I'll see you again soon. Take care and happy painting. Bye.